So can socialism actually work? Yes, history shows that humans, for the most, have mostly lived in some type of egalitarian and socialist society. Peter Prokopkin, in his book Mutual Aid: A Factor in Evolution, talked about how mutualism and cooperation is more normal than competition. Often you'll hear, especially people with that lean right, talk about that. The idea that human nature is to compete, but the reality is human nature, human survival, human success has all been built around cooperation. Obviously there has long been power struggles. There have long been hierarchies and power imbalances since even before capitalism rose a few hundred years ago. But when you look at the scope of human history, what you see is that collaboration and cooperation and mutualism is actually, one of the driving forces of human success and human survival. Elinor Ostrom, in Governing the Commons, talked about how social ownership and government of the commons is common throughout all cultures and all history, and that social ownership is very successful. The commons, as we know them, the public sphere, the things that are owned by all of us, was generally forcibly privatized with capitalism. And we're seeing that even more with neoliberalism, which we'll get into later. But one of the key pillars of neoliberalism is privatization, right? The little bit of the commons that we still have is being worn away under the neoliberal systems that we have now that rule the world. And it's important to note, right? And this is a big part of selling socialism. Socialism isn't an end goal, but it's an ongoing process, right? This isn't something where there's peace, love, and happiness when we check all the boxes. As long as there are people on Earth, as long as there are two of us, we're going to have disagreements. We live on a dynamic Earth in a dynamic ecosystem. So that means we're going to have to adapt, right? So there is no just kind of peaceful end state. And I'm very Marxist in that sense, that I don't believe in a peaceful end state where just everything's sunshine and rainbows, right? We're always going to have to keep evolving. We're always going to have to keep adjusting. We're always going to have to maintain a fluidity, because society and nature are not static, right? They are fluid things. And so when we're organizing and we're pushing, we're working within within a dynamic system, so we will always have to remain dynamic. That said, we can learn from history and we can form new strategies, right? It's really important. A lot of socialists really get, anchored down to deifying past theory and deifying past projects. And we can absolutely learn from those things. But we live in a dynamic world. And so those things that were true then may not be true now. The things that worked then may not work now. The things that failed then may work now, right? And so we can learn those lessons, but we've got to be applying them to our current material conditions. And it's always going to be an ongoing process. Yeah. So it's hard as a socialist organizer, because often people will want a vision of that end point, right? And there isn't one. There really isn't one. And it's a setup for failure when you get asked that. So you should recognize it, because people will often ask it. And you can try to flip it on them. What's the end point for capitalism? The world burning down, right? It's what we're heading towards at at 60 miles an hour, straight off the edge of the cliff. So, I think it's really important that we understand that socialism isn't an end goal, but it's a process, and that we learn from history to form these new strategies.